Hey guys, it's Misty from the Book Rat, and it's time for Book Chat. Before I get into this month's topic, I just want to give a big shout out to everyone who did a response for last month's topic. There were a lot of you guys brought up a lot of great buzzwords and deal breakers, and watching your videos and reading your posts made me realize how many of my own I missed. I really do have a lot of buzzwords and a lot of deal breakers, so you guys rock. This month's topic is how you choose the books you read. First, I have to give a little bit of a shout out to Priscilla from The Readables. We had some kind of weird mind meld thing going on. She had a Let's Talk video last month that sort of addressed this topic, as well as answering the book chat for last month. So we're kind of on the same wavelength, so if you want to see her thoughts on it, check out her Let's Talk. Mine's going to be slightly different. I want to address how you choose the books you read and how that sort of changed over the years, whether it's, just your reading preferences or you choose your books differently now because of blogging or bloggers or literary magazines, or you're not in school anymore, whatever it is, that kind of determines which books you choose to pick up. For me, I feel like this video could go really long. I think I tend to change how I choose books, or I'm constantly finding new ways to choose books all the time. So when I was a kid, pretty much if it had a scary cover, I guess, if it was something supposed to be a little creepy, then that's probably how I chose that book. But as I got a little bit older, I'd say I went mostly on either friend recommendations or books that I thought were kind of smarty pants, because I thought I was kind of smarty pants. Once I sort of got out of high school, and still had assigned reading, for college that wasn't necessarily for pleasure, even if it was good, I had to have my for pleasure books. Now, it's a lot easier to work in a YA book than it is in adult literary fiction or a classic when you've already got, 5 classes worth of reading to do. And I was an English major, so, there was reading in every single class. So I think I sort of started reading more YA then, but I did it on the sly. I was always a little bit embarrassed of what the librarians would think. And I have a sister who's 10 years younger than me, so sometimes I would just pretend that I was getting them for her. And then I kind of became friends with a lot of the librarians, and turns out most of my librarian friends are youth librarians. So they were all reading teen books, and they were recommending them to me. And I think also at some point I was just like, whatever, I don't care what you think. So I kind of got over the embarrassment of reading YA and sort of owned it, to the point that now I'm a YA book blogger, so obviously not ashamed of it anymore. But when I started reading YA, this was before it was huge and before it kind of became mainstream, and before, my librarian started recommending things to me. I kind of just had to choose by what looked good, and I would just go to the library and browse. But for me, it wasn't enough. It's too hit and miss, I think, to browse. And you never know when you're missing out on something great just because the cover didn't catch you or the title didn't catch you. So I picked up literary magazines and joined Goodreads. When I joined Goodreads, I actually joined it back in 2007 and then ended up deleting the account just because I didn't have time. But it was an act of desperation because I wanted something to read, but I also wanted a venue for discussing it. But I'd say I still chose mostly based on word of mouth and literary reviews, things in magazines, because I trusted those. And I would track down the best of lists and all the award lists and stuff. I have an entire binder just full of them. And I think for a good long while, that was how I chose. And book blogging, I'd say, was the next thing that changed it. That was the big shift in how I chose books. And it's also why I decided on this for the topic for this month. Previously, everything I read was based on enjoyment. And I was still in the phase where if I started it, I had to finish it, so it wasn't necessarily always enjoyable. But the way I chose was just because it sounded good or it looked good. And it was all stuff that was already out. I'd never had an arc at that point, or knew what one was. When I switched to book blogging, I was out of school at this point and missing writing essays and missing expressing my opinions and the things that I had taken from a book, and recommending and just the sort of discussion around books. Obviously, when you kind of enter that world, you start finding out about books a lot sooner, and I think that the popularity of book blogging and Goodreads, along with the recognition of ARCs, has kind of spread outside of the book blogging community, and it's becoming a lot more mainstream. So I think everybody is starting to find out about books a lot farther in advance now, and have anticipated ones that aren't necessarily the next in the series. You know, you anticipate debuts and things, which before I don't think you would have even known about it until you saw it on the shelves. So I think it's kind of changed everyone's sort of perspective on books. Finding out about books far in advance and reading other people's blogs and seeing what they were excited for and what they were pushing and the books that they were reading way in advance started determining how I chose my books, because then I wasn't necessarily choosing based on what I owned, what I saw at the library. I was choosing for the future. I was planning and scheduling, so that by nature ends up cutting down on those random, this sounds interesting books, because you can't necessarily fit in the small, never heard of them books if you've got this huge stack of review books plus this huge stack of books that you've bought and want to read. So you start prioritizing and you start crossing things off the list, and I think it kind of limits, in a way. Getting advanced copies and blogging about books, getting books for the blogging and for a review, for an interview, whatever, opens up all of these possibilities, because before you wouldn't have been able to get the books, and you're getting it early, you're getting a sneak peek, and sort of moves up your timetable. But it comes with the drawback of limiting what you're actually going to read and what you even sort of focus on. Since I do blog about mostly YA books, when I read an adult book that's not a quick read, I almost feel guilty, because I know I've got this stack of books that I've got to do. I mean, even in my March wrap-up, I talked about how I worked in Blood Fever by Kieran Marie Wanning. Even that made me feel a little guilty, and I was only able to justify it with the fact that I was homesick that day, so I wouldn't have been reading what I was supposed to be reading anyway, so it was like a freebie. If that hadn't happened, I probably either would have read it and felt awful because I would have had to cut something, or I wouldn't have read it and had it sitting on the shelves and been wanting to read it, and whatever I was reading would have suffered because I wouldn't have been focusing on the book I was reading, and I would have almost been holding it against that book because it wasn't the book that I wanted to be reading, even if it was good. So that thought was kind of what made me want to start this book chat. And if you're not a book blogger or vlogger, there's definitely a place in this discussion for you too. You know, you can talk about how reading book blogs or watching booktubers has changed how you pick your books, and the sort of societal discussion-based atmosphere kind of shapes how you read and what you choose to read. I don't want to call it peer pressure because I don't think it necessarily is, but if you are part of these sort of circles that are all reading the same book, do you feel the need to read it too? Does it amp up your excitement level? There's definitely a place for you in this discussion. But for those of you who do blog or review on Goodreads or here on YouTube, do you think about this? And do you think that making the decision to blog or vlog or whatever has not only shaped the way you choose which books to read, but also the way you perceive reading now? Do you read differently now? So before you might have just been reading for pleasure and tearing through it, but now are you seeking out points that you want to mention in your review? Are you constantly revising in your head, this is a 4-star, this is a 3-star, this is a 5-star? Do you mark things so that you can quote them later? Just has it changed who you are as a reader? It does feel really strange, and it feels like a weird place to be in when I have these books that I'm excited about and will share my excitement with someone, but then say, oh, but I can't read it yet. Like, that just feels a little almost silly in some respects. But, you know, I like anticipation and I like delayed gratification, so for me it's still worth it. But I don't deny the fact that there may come a day when it's not going to be worth it anymore. But yeah, that's definitely where I'm at now. Book blogging and vlogging has taken over how I choose books, and I don't necessarily have the luxury of browsing the way I did before. because that's just adding, 5, 10, 15 more books to the pile. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say this month and how conscious you are of the way you choose books, and if there's anything that you do to sort of combat the ruts and the scheduled out blues and whatever it may be. So eager to hear what you say. If you don't want to do a blog or vlog, you're welcome to just leave your answer in the comments, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Happy reading!